morning. I am Mira Bernstein with NASA's Office of Communications. Welcome to the update on NASA's Mars Sample Return Program. Here in the room with me, we have NASA Administrator Bill Nelson, and on the phone we have Nikki Fox, NASA Associate Administrator, Science Mission Directorate. Each of our speakers will share opening remarks, and then we will take questions from reporters on the phone line. Also available to take questions are Jeff Grambling, Mars Sample Return Program Director, and Danya Douglas Bradshaw, Mars Sample Return Deputy Director. Reporters can enter *1 on your phone to be entered into the question queue at any time. So first, I will turn it over to NASA Administrator Bill Nelson.
Hey, everybody. Since February of 2021, the Perseverance rover has been collecting samples on Mars from the lake bed of the Jezero crater up the sides of the crater at the location where a river once came into that lake, and it's going up onto the rim of the crater. And at the end of the day, we'll have about 30 samples, all sealed, that are cores that have been drilled, that are about the size of a cigar, sealed in titanium tubes, all about the size of a cigar. And as that plan had proceeded, it continued to be delayed as to when we would get the samples back, and the cost began to accelerate to the point that earlier this past year, it was thought that it could be as much as $11 billion, and you would not even get the samples back till 2040. Well, that was just simply unacceptable. It was my decision that, in consultation with everyone, we pulled the plug on it. And in April of this past year, announced that NASA would go out and seek innovative new designs on how to return the samples to Earth, and to have that at a much less cost, and to return those samples in the decade of the 2030s. Lower not only the cost, but the risk and the mission complexity. And so a Mars sample return strategy review team is what its name was. It was formed to assess those proposals that would come in and offer suggestions on a new architecture. So we're telling you today where we're going forward on this. All the work that has taken place since April of 24. NASA is going to explore two potential, in other words, two options, architecture possibilities. And the decision over the course of time, with all the engineering that has to go into it, the final decision is likely to come in 2026. So option number one is to use what has already been previously tested and successfully used on the entry, descent, and landing capabilities, and that's the Sky Crane. And it's been used twice successfully on Curiosity and Perseverance. The second architecture, or option 2, is looking at the possibility of going into commercial capabilities of a heavy lander with existing commercial partners. Either of these two options are creating a much more simplified, faster, and less expensive version than the original plan. So, for example, utilizing the sky crane approach with a direct return to Earth by a European Space Agency return vehicle, which has been planned all along. And by the way, there were people that have asked NASA to look at a cislunar return, of which then that would necessitate, once you've got it, the sample in cislunar, then you've got to go and get it. NASA's preference, even though there is a division of opinion here, NASA's preference is that we have a direct return. So with the sky crane option, you're looking at cost in the range of $6.6 billion to $7.7 billion. That's a far cry from $11 billion. With the heavy lift vehicle, and what do I mean by heavy lift? I'm talking about utilizing commercial partners. You all know that SpaceX and Blue Origin have already been ones that have expressed an interest, but it could be others as well. And a team is evaluating and researching all industry capabilities to include the schedule and the budget to determine the best strategy going forward. And that includes these commercial providers. So with the heavy lift commercial providers, the estimate on the cost would be from a low of $5.8 billion to a high of $7.1 billion. And the direct return would be in the range as early as 2035, but it could go out to 2039. Now, a good reason of why it could get extended out is if the Congress and the new administration do not respond. We're talking about this fiscal year getting the money to get this thing going. We're talking about fiscal year 25, of which we're already in since October the 1st. It should have at least $300 million. The variation in both the House and the Senate is at $200 million for Mars sample return. The House is, I think, somewhere in the range of $600 million. So I'm stating to you at this point that the bottom line of $300 million is what the Congress ought to consider. And if they want to get this thing back on a direct return earlier, they're going to have to put more money into it, even more than $300 million in fiscal year 25. So, and that would be the case every year going forward. So that is an outline. I'm going to turn it over to our Associate Administrator, Nikki Fox. Dr. Fox, take it away.
Thank you so much, Administrator Nelson. Appreciate those remarks. Of course, nobody needs a reminder that at NASA we do extraordinary science research in extraordinary places, and of course Mars is one of those. The samples that we have been collecting on Mars are very carefully selected to provide these groundbreaking opportunities for research, and bringing them back will revolutionize our understanding of the planet Mars and indeed our place in the solar system. We explore Mars as part of our ongoing efforts to safely send humans to explore farther and farther into the solar system, while also kind of getting to the bottom of whether Mars once supported ancient life and shedding life on the early solar system. The samples that we have taken by Perseverance actually predate. They are older than any of the samples, rocks that we could take here on Earth. So it allows us to kind of investigate what the early solar system was like before life began here on Earth, which is amazing. Right now, of course, Mars is a barren planet, with the only inhabitants on Mars being our robotic rovers, our robotic explorers. So the Mars Sample Return Program remains the next step for us to be able to study samples from the planet Mars. It's humanity's first mission to bring scientific samples from any planet right back here to Earth for study using our state-of-the-art facilities. So they'll not only help NASA prioritize which areas of the red planet might be the most fruitful for our future astronaut-led research, but they'll also lead to more incredible scientific discoveries about what life might have been like here on Earth, or rather what Earth was like before life, as well as what life might have been like on Mars, and indeed what it could look like in the future. Perseverance, we love to think of as the first stage of our Mars Sample Return mission. It's very healthy and stable, and it has been diligently collecting samples for their scientific potential. So right now it's filled 28 sample tubes. 22 of those are different types of rock. 2 are regolith, 1 is an atmospheric sample, and 3 are witness tubes. That leaves us with 13 tantalizing tubes still left to be filled. This is really extraordinary science, and we can't wait to study in more detail and in ways that, honestly, we just can't do robotically on the surface of Mars. So therefore, it is of utmost importance to us that we bring back these samples to Earth as quickly as possible. And of course, to do that, we needed to get very creative. So the administrator went into a high-level kind of overview of what our Mars sample return architecture possibilities could look like, and I'm just going to go into a little bit more detail for you. So as he said, we are exploring 2 new landing options. One is to leverage technology that we've previously used to land both Perseverance and Curiosity on Mars. The other is to leverage options from industry. Both of these options would use a redesigned landing platform, and that platform would carry the Mars Ascent Vehicle to the surface of Mars. It would also replace the solar panels with a radioisotope power system. That may sound like we're making it more complicated, but actually that provides power and heat through the dust storm season on Mars. And so that actually allows us to reduce complexity, and it opens up, it actually allows us to bring back the samples earlier. We will require a redesign of the sample loading system onto the lander. And so that's basically how we get the samples into the orbiting sample container. The redesign will allow us to simplify the backward planetary protection approach. So it eliminates any accumulation of dust on the outside of the sample container. So this is a new approach to actually loading the samples into the container. That allows us to have a simplified capture, containment, and return system. The orbiting sample container will contain all 30 of those precious sample tubes, and it will also still rely on the European Space Agency's Earth Return Orbiter to capture the orbiting sample container in the Mars orbit. The administrator thanked Professor Maria Zuba and her team, but I do want to add my thanks also for their incredible work. And I also want to take a moment to thank all of the teams who participated in the studies. All of their efforts have really enabled these revised architecture options that allow us to return and maximize the use of heritage systems throughout the architectures. It allows us to really minimize risk, and therefore we feel that we are very confident that we can return all 30 samples before 2040 and for less than the $11 billion as the administrator already described. Just to kind of hit those one more time, this requires us going back to the heritage Skycrane landing or using a commercially enabled large mass delivery system. It lowers the mass of the Mars ascent vehicle. It lowers both the mass and the complexity of the sample retriever lander, and that really is enabled by that smaller Mars ascent vehicle. It allows us to go back to a heritage robotic arm, so essentially using the spare for the Perseverance rover. It replaces the power for the sample return landing system to the radioisotope thermal generator. It has this kind of innovative break the chain method starting on the surface of Mars that allows us to really simplify the backward planetary protection. That enables us to simplify the capture, containment, and return system. And it also reduces a lot of organizational complexity. And once again, it really lowers the risk on the mission. So we're really excited about this. As always, my priority is to find a path forward for Mars sample return within a balanced overall science program so that NASA science continues to deliver every second of every day for the benefit of all. And all of these new possibilities that we've outlined today will help achieve that. It'll help us achieve delivering this science for everybody. It will allow us to bring back the samples earlier so the United States can continue to lead the world in its mission to explore the next frontier for humanity, or Mars. So I very much look forward to announcing more updates throughout now and into 2026. And of course, I really look forward to bringing back these precious samples back to Earth. So with that, I'll toss it back to you, Mira. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll now turn to questions. You can press *1 on your phone to be entered into the question queue at any time. Your phones are on mute now, and the operator will open your mic when we're ready and close your mic after you ask your question. Please identify to whom your question is directed, and please respect everyone's time by asking only one question, and if we have time, we'll move to a second round. So with that, I will turn it over to the operator for questions.
Thank you. Our first question comes from Marcia Dunn with AP. Your line is open.
Yes, hi, thank you. I know the original plan involved, seemed like a dozen or more spacecraft coming and going. How many spacecraft vehicle are we talking about for option 1 and 2? How many fewer spacecraft and launches than the original plan? Thank you.
Nikki, I want you or your team to answer that. I just want to point out, underscore what Nikki said. It's a simplified architecture. It is cleaning the tubes on the surface of Mars instead of doing that in the return vehicle, the European return vehicle. It's a simplified catcher's mitt program. It's using one of the already created arms for Perseverance as the means by which of transferring the tubes out of Perseverance over into the lander, which then transfers them into the Mars ascent vehicle. So the architecture all the way around, she mentioned also the generation of electricity and the reason that needed to be changed. So the whole system not only is smaller in volume and smaller in weight, but is a much more simplified system all the way through. Go ahead, Nikki.
Thanks so much. I appreciate that. Thanks for the question, Marcia. So it doesn't actually reduce the number of, we still need to launch, so there's still a launch of the landing system, and there's still the MAV to launch from the surface of Mars, and there's still the Earth return orbiter to essentially return the samples back to to Earth. There's no sort of easy way to get rid of any of these elements. These elements are there throughout. It's just really focusing on simplifying each of those pieces, as the administrator just said. But the actual launch and landing hardware, the tally remains the same.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Jeff Faust with Space News. Your line is open.
Good afternoon. Question for her, either the administrator or Dr. Fox. What exactly is NASA going to be doing between now and sometime in 2026 when you make the decision on the architectures? What are you going to be studying over the next year plus? What sort of level of maturity in the designs are you going to get to before you make a decision? Thanks.
Yeah, great question, and thanks, Mr. Administrator. Thanks, Jeff. Great question. So we will be working very hard on the engineering design for each of these solutions. So even though we say, it's the Heritage Sky Crane landing system, of course it is a very high heritage landing system, but the actual, it needs to be about 20% bigger than the Sky Crane that landed Perseverance. And so there is the engineering that goes into that piece. There is the engineering study that goes into looking at how to produce that lower mass Mars ascent vehicle. So there's all of the kind of it's almost the normal engineering that we would do to get it up to the preliminary design, the PDR level maturity. And the milestone for that is mid 2026. And so at that point, we would expect that each of these elements would have got their engineering design up to PDR level, and then we would be ready to go for agency confirmation. There are obviously, for any industry provided elements, there would be milestones for them to demonstrate in that plan as well, so that when we get to that decision point, we have all the information we need to be able to make the right decision for the mission.
Next question.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Nell Greenfeld-Boyce with NPR. Your line is open.
Thank you for having this briefing. Happy New Year. Administrator Nelson, you mentioned there was a difference of opinion on direct return to Earth versus, say, putting samples in lunar orbit. Why does NASA prefer direct return to Earth? And also, you mentioned the Mars sample return strategy review team. What recommendations did they have that you all chose not to pursue? Thank you.
Thanks. Nikki, pick up on the specifics, but let me just say, if you send the sample into cislunar, then you've got the additional cost, engineering, and time to have to go retrieve it and bring it to Earth. And if you can bring it safely on the European return vehicle straight to Earth, that's why NASA's preference is to have direct return. Yes, there was a difference of opinion on that team, and I'll let Nikki speak to that.
Thanks so much. Actually, you nailed it. That's exactly why we prefer the direct to Earth. It actually, overall, it reduces complexity because there's one less element. Otherwise, you almost have to add a fourth leg to Mars sample return to go and find the OS in cislunar and return it to Earth. It does add cost in the near years because you are moving ahead with, you're kind of trying to do everything in parallel, but there's significant cost added in the out years if we have to budget to actually go and get those samples back from cislunar. So there was some discussion with the review team about which path to go forward, and they provided options for both the cislunar as well as the direct Earth return. We chose to try and move ahead with the direct Earth return. It does bring the samples back sooner, and as I say, it reduces complexity and actually reduces overall cost for the mission.
Next question.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Joey Roulette with Reuters. Your line is open.
Hi, thank you. This question, I guess, is for anyone who wants to answer. I was wondering if you could detail some of the ideas that the companies proposed for these missions and what the pros and cons would be between choosing the commercial version instead of the Sky Crane option. Thanks.
Nikki?
Yeah, sure. I mean, as I said, there are going to be milestones to show that both paths forward would actually be able to return the samples on the schedule that we want to do. I don't really want to go into a lot of details about what was in the individual studies because there is proprietary information in there. So I'll speak more generally that, you know, we've tried to sort of all the goodness that I listed, all those great ideas that we took to actually simplify the mission, all of those came from the various different studies, either from industry or from our internal NASA or JPL or APL studies that came in. There were different concepts for how to land on Mars. We looked at each of those concepts. We sort of boiled it down to going with a higher heritage Sky Crane when we were able to actually do the engineering simplifications to actually allow us to be able to use a Sky Crane, basically getting the mass down of the landed mass. And then either in the industry studies, some of those had a kind of Sky Crane architecture. Some of them had powered landings, and some of them had a large landing capability.
Question?
Thank you. Our next question comes from Joel Achenbach with Washington Post. Your line is open.
Thank you so much. One question is, were you hoping to make a final decision by now? I mean, you're not deciding finally whether you're going to go one path or the other. Why can't you decide now which is the best option? And just to clarify one thing, the Sky Crane method, would that be a JPL operation since they invented the Sky Crane? Thank you.
Nikki, you take the last part on the Sky Crane. The reason Nikki has explained that they need to flesh out all of the possibilities of what's required in the engineering for the commercial option. We want to have the quickest, cheapest way to get these 30 samples back. And the next reason to answer your question is, this is going to be a function of the new administration in order to fund this. And it's an appropriation that has to start right now, fiscal year 25. And it's going to have to continue on. It's going to have to continue at a level that you could get either with the heavy lift vehicles, get back in a direct return in 2035, as opposed to stretching it out in the decade. It's going to be a direct function of how the appropriations goes. So for those two reasons, is why we are at the point of announcing to you the two options today. With regard to the Sky Crane, Nikki?
Yeah, thanks so much, Bill. So yes, I mean, to put it really bluntly, JPL is our is our Mars center in NASA science. So regardless of which path we go forward with, JPL will have a key role moving forward. They are the ones with the experience of landing on Mars, as you noted, Joel. You know, they are the people who landed us on Mars together with our industry partners. So they would be moving forward regardless of which path with a key role in the Mars sample return.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Issam Ahmed with AFP. Your line is open.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to clarify that in both the legacy and the private options, would you still be using the Mars Ascent Vehicle, the European return lander. And if you could just sort of flesh out a little bit more what the cislunar versus direct options look like in terms of the trajectory, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
The answer is yes to both of your questions. Go ahead, Nikki.
Yeah, thank you. So yes, the Earth Return Orbiter is a key piece of both of the paths forward. The Mars Ascent Vehicle, yes, we definitely need a way to get off the planet. It's hard to land on Mars. Man, it's hard to get off Mars. So we're very excited about working with our partners on continuing to look for ways to do that. The enabling piece in the new architecture, I can't say this enough, the enabling piece in the new architecture was really being able to get that smaller nav, the smaller Mars Ascent Vehicle that allowed us to go back to the Sky Crane, which is really, really key. But yes, we would require a Mars Ascent Vehicle in both of the scenarios. Some of the engineering work that needs to be done is looking at the launch loads that would be on the landing system on either one of the two paths. You have to be able to, in order to have a Mars Ascent Vehicle that's ready to ascend from Mars, it needs to survive the landing. And so there is some engineering work that would need to be done on, exactly what the Mars Ascent Vehicle needs to look like in order to be able to do that. That is part of the work that we'll be doing in the next year, coming into that decision point mid-2026. But both of those are very key. And then you asked for a little more details on the direct to Earth versus the cislunar. If you kind of think of the direct to Earth as a sort of OSIRIS-REx type operation where there is an Earth flyby and the sort of return piece is dropped with parachutes in the same way, very, very similar to the way that we returned those OSIRIS-REx samples. So that would be that's the direct to Earth trajectory. Coming into cislunar, obviously it's a different trajectory, but it allows capture by the moon. Then the kind of return piece would stay in orbit around cislunar, pending us sending something up to return it. I'm actually going to ask Jeff Gramling if he would like to add anything about the specifics of the different trajectory. Not hearing Jeff. He was having trouble with his phone. Danya Douglas Bradshaw, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Nikki. Thank you. Nothing more specific to add beyond what you said. Just that it would be, as you said, in a lunar orbit, and we need a spacecraft and a system to go up and grab it and return it back to Earth.
Okay, thanks, Jen. All right, back to you, Mira.
Yeah, next question.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Gina Sansari with ABC News. Your line is open.
Thank you. This is for the administrator. Sir, if you had ever woken up at night and said, gosh, I just need this technology to work, what would that be to make this easier?
Would you ask your question again, please?
Sure, Mr. Administrator. Did you ever wake up in the middle of the night and say, oh, come on, if this technology existed, this would make this so much easier for us?
Well, the very reason that we pulled the plug was this thing had gotten out of control. Now, you can ask the question, since one of the options that's being considered is the Sky Crane, why, when this was originally being designed, was it being designed with a much larger lander so they could not employ the already existing and successful Sky Crane? And of course, if you build a bigger and so-called better mousetrap, it's going to be more complicated and it's going to get more costly. And fortunately, we saw that the money was just not going to be there, not only with the Office of Management and Budget, but with the Congress as well, that if you recall, that it's the years fiscal year 24 and 25 that the overall federal budget was cut back, having nothing to do with NASA, but NASA was part of the recipient of those cuts to the tune of $5 billion over that 2 years, about $2.5 billion a year. And you simply can't do everything that you want to do with less dollars. And so that took us right directly to the Mars sample return that was just continuing to escalate in cost. And I think what our wizards at NASA have figured out is that they've come up now with a solution to get the successful objective that we want to achieve. And that is we want to return 30 titanium tubes as soon as possible at the cheapest price. And I am very happy that they've come up with these alternatives.
Thank you. Next question.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Bill Harwood with CBS News. Your line is open.
Thank you very much. This is for the administrator as well. In any of your discussions with the new or the proposed incoming administrator or the administration, have you gotten any sense of their willingness to support this mission in some form? I mean, I realize, you haven't been able to go into great detail, but I'm just wondering what the mood seems to be is from your perspective of the incoming administration to support a mission that will still be very costly. Thanks.
Bill, I have not. That has been handed by the formal transition apparatus. So the answer is no. I have not had those conversations, but I think it was a responsible thing to do not to hand the new administration just one alternative if they want to have a Mars sample return, which I can't imagine that they don't. I don't think we want the only sample return coming back on a Chinese spacecraft. And that's just simply a grab and go kind of mission, whereas ours has been a very methodical process with not only perseverance, but a scout named Ingenuity to find different samples of different layers showing different ages of material and rocks. And it's going to give quite a history when we bring back those 30 samples, quite a history of what Mars was like millions of years ago when there was water in that lake and there was water coming down that river. And the big question, was there life millions of years ago? So I think that the administration will certainly conclude that they want to proceed. So what we wanted to do was to give them the best possible options so that they can go from here.
Next question, please.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Stephen Clark with ARS Technica. Your line is open.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. I have several questions, but I'll try to limit it to one or two for the administrator. This may be a provocative question, so I beg your pardon, but how does deferring a decision on an architecture for another year or more, inspire confidence that you'll be able to get the samples back sooner than the original date of 2040? Where is the sense of urgency with Perseverance aging? And of course, you mentioned China planning their own sample return mission. And secondly, for either Jeff Grambling or Donia Douglas Bradshaw, with the commercial options under review over the next year, are you planning to fund any study contracts with them, put out an RFP or any sort of announcement for NASA funding to study their technologies and do some early development work for these options? Thanks.
Okay, and Steve, your first question was what? Steve?
I'm not sure he can come back, actually.
Okay.
He was asking, really, I think the essence was, why are we waiting a year, and how does that enable the new administration to make a decision when we're obviously trying to do this as fast as possible?
And I think you explained that in the engineering that has to go into an evaluation. You want to run that by again?
Yeah, sure. We will spend the next year doing all of the engineering to get us to a point where we can make, it isn't just actually making the decision on which path to go forward. Whichever path we go forward with, there is a lot of engineering work to do, whether it is, doing the work on the sky crane, whether it is working with a commercial partner to assess the capability of a commercially provided large mass delivery system. It is working on getting finalizing the design of a lower mass Mars ascent vehicle, et cetera. Finalizing how we're going to do the sample collection on the surface of Mars and lowering that backward planetary protection constraint. So it is whichever path we go forward with, there is work to be done to get us to a point where we can say, yes, yea, verily, this is the mission we're going to go forward with. This is when we confirm the budget. This is when we confirm the schedule. Steve, you know that as KDPC in NASA speak, that is our confirmation review. And there is work, there is quite intensive engineering work that needs to be done to get us to that point with either of the two paths. And so it is about getting that work done, and then in sort of mid-26, actually having everything at that maturity level for us to be able to actually confirm the mission and move forward. And we are, ready, kind of poised in the starter's blocks to be ready to start doing that engineering pending, obviously, support for the mission moving forward.
And Steve, the function of when the sample return could be done is a function of the administration making a decision on how much money they want to spend. And that is the province of the new administration that comes in. The path that we've set now also is a path that would launch the European return vehicle, would launch in the year 2030. And all of this stuff, and so expenditures have got to be made now in order to get all of this done, even though the final engineering on just the question of the lander, there's all these other things that have to be developed as well. The catcher's mitt, the cleaning of the tubes, the new kind of electrical generation, all the lander itself, which the arm, the utilization of an arm that has already been developed for perseverance, all of those are expenditures that have to start now. So it's not like you're not doing anything until 26 when you determine your final determination of what is going to be actually the lander.
And there was a second part of the question that I think you wanted Jeff or Danya to answer about the path forward for including industry. Jeff Bramling, I think you're on now.
Can you hear me, Nikki?
Yes, I can. Yeah. Do you want to hit
Right.
that one, Jeff?
Yeah, great. So I think the question was what's the plan to get procurements out to enable the dual path approach? So the answer is we would like to get those in place as soon as possible. We've begun conversations with our Office of Procurement to do that, and we're working to put a plan together here in the next couple months for agency approval, and we're looking to get those done as soon as possible so that we can have the maturity that we're looking for at the agency confirmation review that Nikki was talking about.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you. We're going to try and get through a few more questions before we have to hop. So next question, please.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Alexandria Whitsey with Nature Magazine. Your line is open.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. My question is about timing. If there's a decision point in mid-2026, what is the earliest possible launch date for each of the two options, and how do you get all that work done between mid-2026 and that launch date?
So thanks for the question. I'll sort of answer the second bit first, which is, we'll put together a really comprehensive schedule to show that we can do all of the work. And that's just kind of business as usual. We do move fast once we confirm the missions to move ahead with getting all that technical work done. The earliest possible launches that we would be looking at would be 2030 for the Earth Return Orbiter and 2031 for the other piece, the Sample Return Lander.
Thank you. Next question.
Thank you. Our next question is from Alan Woodward with Wall Street Journal. Your line is open.
Hi, thanks so much for taking my question. This is for the administrator. So MSR is a flagship program that historically would have always been run in-house. And, so we're broaching the possibility of enhanced, more commercial participation to cut costs. Sort of what does that say, I guess, about the state of NASA and its centers or JPL, as you said, it is Mars, specifically to sort of pull off flagships?
It says that we have not only commercial partners, but international partners as well. And here's a good example of MSR. You see that in the going to the moon with humans and ultimately on the Mars. You see that we're going back in a different way, not a way that we did half a century ago, which it was just entirely government. This time it's with commercial partners and with international partners.
Yes, just to add to that, it's a great question, and we have just a long, rich history in NASA science of working very closely with our commercial industry and our international partners, as Bill just said. If you look at the James Webb Space Telescope, the flagship of all flagships, and that was built largely out of house in industry. This is not unusual for us to turn to our industry partners and infuse all of their wisdom and their technology into our NASA flagship missions, and that has really been across the board. You can look at any one of our flagship missions and look at all of the industry that are actually taking part in that. And in fact, I think we sometimes it's exciting to work on the NASA missions, and we can actually drive some technology and drive capability in our international partners as well because of the really exciting targets that we have with NASA science. So this is not at all an unusual approach for us to do this.
Next question.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Denise Chow with NBC. Your line is open.
Hi, thank you. This is for Administrator Nelson. I'm wondering how much of NASA's decision-making up until this point and also until you have a final decision in 2026 will be guided by trying to at least stay competitive with China's plans for a sample return from Mars and how important that is. Thank you.
You cannot compare the two. Ours, as I explained earlier, is an extremely well thought out mission created by the scientific community of the world as to what are various sites in and around the Jezero crater that will give us a picture of the historical record millions of years ago when there was water there. And of the total number of samples is, I think, upwards of 40, but there are 10 that were placed on the surface on an earlier iteration that was, again, a very expensive iteration that was to fly a lander back with a helicopter that was going to pick up the 10 samples. That was a fallback position. if something happened to Perseverance. This one, they are confident that Perseverance is working where it can crawl over to the lander. And of course, the lander would be landing near Perseverance in its location at that particular time. And so you compare that to at least what has been said publicly by the Chinese government, and that is that they're just going to have a mission to grab and go. Go to a landing site of their choosing, grab a sample, and go. That does not give you the comprehensive look for the science community. So you cannot compare the two missions. Now, will people say that there's a race? Well, of course, people will say that. But it's two totally different missions.
Next question.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Irene Klotz with Aviation Week. Your line is open.
Thanks very much. I think this question's probably for Nikki. Can you generically describe the differences between option 1 and option 2 as far as what hardware and components would not be needed if NASA decided or Congress decided to go a commercial heavy route? It's a little, without getting into proprietary things, it's a little unclear. You've elaborated on the components that are similar, but I haven't really picked up on what exactly is different and how you sort of square off Sky Crane versus anything else, if that's indeed the crux of it. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a really great question, actually. I think I've highlighted all the similarities and not the differences, so I appreciate the question. So really, the main difference is in the landing mechanism. One is the high heritage Sky Crane landing that you have seen. That's the system, the same system as we use to land Perseverance and Curiosity. With the large mass delivery, we obviously do need to work with our commercial partners to really get details of what that would look like. That is the ability to get a large amount of mass to the surface of Mars. It would be certainly a greater amount of mass than a Sky Crane could land. And so that is exciting for us. It's an enabling thing as we look to the future. It's an enabling thing both for NASA science as well as NASA exploration to be able to take these really large masses down to the surface. So we're excited to hear about their capabilities and their schedule for being able to do that. We would still require the Mars Ascent Vehicle. We hope that, honestly, the goal is to maximize the amount of similarity between the two. So the engineering work that we do in the next year is really applicable to both of them. The big difference is in that landing. So the Sky Crane would take the sample retriever lander directly to the surface of Mars. A large mass delivery, it would have the platform, the sort of landing platform we would have to get that off the commercial lander, so that is a different mechanism. Instead of landing with the Sky Crane, we have to figure out a way to actually get the other elements off the large lander. So that's work that we need to do in the next year to sort of figure out how we would do that. But we would still require that platform. We would still require the ability to transfer the samples, and we still require the ability to get the samples into orbit. But the big difference there is just that landing mechanism and the ability to get the platform onto the surface of Mars. And so that's where the differences are. But, I think it's a great opportunity for us to be able to do it, whichever path. I'm excited about both paths. I think that we can really do this. If we work together with our partners, with our international partners, with our commercial partners, with all of our amazing NASA expertise, I think this is a really great thing that we can do. So I'm super excited about bringing these samples back.
Thank you. We have time for one final question.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Marcia Smith with SpacePolicyOnline.com. Your line is open.
Thanks so much. I think this one is for Nikki. Could you talk a little bit more about the advantages of using RTGs instead of solar panels? And if you want to launch in 2031, do you have enough time to get those RTGs ready? Is that a pacing item in all of this by deciding to go with RTGs?
Thanks for the question. I'm going to unashamedly phone a friend who has a lot more information about this, which will be Jeff Gramling, and I'm going to ask him to answer the question about the advantages of the RTG over the solar panels, what that enables.
Sure. There are two primary advantages. One is it gives us the opportunity to operate during dust storm seasons, and the surface ops timeline is one of the main drivers here to make sure we've got time to transfer the 30 tubes and get off and hold our mission timeline. The other is it helps us make sure we can keep the solid rocket motors on the MAV warm, and that, which is where they like to be, and it helps make sure that we can operate the MAV within the regime that it prefers to be operated in to preserve our mission ops timeline. Those are the two primary reasons.
Thank you, Jeff. And thank you all for joining us today. A replay of this teleconference will be available later today through February 4th. To hear the replay, dial 866-363-1807. The passcode is 2735. For those who had questions that we weren't able to get to, please feel free to reach out via email. And for more information on the Mars Sample Return Program and to follow along with updates, please visit science.nasa.gov/Mars Sample Return. Have a great day.
Thank you for your participation. Participants, you may disconnect at this time.